and other calls for the reduction, and we've heard it already, you're aware of that 10-point C to reduce the global remittance transfer cost to 3% by 2030 and eliminate corridors with charges over 5%. Now, as part of that 2030 agenda, the General Assembly embarked on an ambitious project called the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration. And the document that's to be adopted later this year is being developed in New York. And currently the draft includes very strong language in Objective 19 and 20, as you've heard, on diaspora contributions and on remittances. And we hope that this forum will help to keep that strong language in the document, but we're also, and I will be very carefully listening to ideas that can be added to the document. Although we are not the pen holders, the member states are, this is the time still for good ideas and a technical review of what is on the table. So let me just give you an example of how specific actually this global compact is going to be. And I quote from Objective 19, which is 1 page, and I just extracted 1 sentence from it. Develop targeted support programs and financial products that facilitate migrant and diaspora investments and entrepreneurship, including by providing administrative and legal support in business creation, granting seed capital matching, establish diaspora bonds, we've heard about it, and diaspora development funds, and organize dedicated trade fairs. Now that's very concrete, detailed language. From Objective 20, establish conducive policy and regulatory frameworks that promote a competitive and innovative remittance market, remove obstacles to non-bank remittance service providers in accessing payment system infrastructure, provide tax exemptions or incentives for remittance transfers, eliminate exclusivity contracts, incentivize the private sector to expand remittance services, and enhance the security and predictability of low-value transactions by revising, and we've heard about this, de-risking policies and developing a methodology to distinguish remittances from illicit flows in consultation with remittance service providers and financial regulators. A terribly long sentence, I agree, but I did want to indicate to you the specificity and in fact the task for us if and when this language is agreed. Now, judging from these quotes, I think we can all say that the compact has the potential to go beyond slogans. And next week, as it happens, the General Assembly will hold the 4th round of negotiations, and I call upon member states, the private sector and civil society to continue to engage with this critical process in New York. Now, the title of our panel today is People on the Move and Inclusive Financial Services in a Globalized Economy. We have with us a very knowledgeable and diverse panel. Ms. Daniela Morari is the State Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and European Integration of the Republic of Moldova. Daniela represents a country that has one of the highest expatriation rates and is thus very familiar with the contribution of diaspora to the development, the impact of remittances, as well as the challenges of migration, such as for families left behind. Sitting left from her is Mr. Alfred Hannig. He's the Executive Director of the Alliance for Financial Inclusion, a global network of policy-making and regulatory institutions from more than 90 countries dedicated to providing the world's unbanked safe access to the formal financial system through smart policy initiatives. And on the extreme left from me, Mr. Tony Fernandes. He launched AirAsia and is currently its Chief Executive Officer. In addition to aviation, he has made numerous contributions to the music industry. As a global citizen and as an employer and a transporter of people, Tony has first-hand experience with the contributions of labor migrants, highly qualified expatriates to economies and societies of origin and destination, and with the need of properly regulating the movement of people in the globalizing economy. So, I think we have about 45 minutes left, and I shared some questions with the panelists, so I also intend to engage with the audience. The panelists will provide brief statements rather than large presentations. But I think I'm going to ask first Mr. Alfred Hannig to actually speak to the issue of financial inclusion. And the question is, what are some of the key stumbling blocks hindering financial access, inclusion of migrants and their families? and what are some of the new and innovative initiatives to promote the financial access of migrants and their families. I believe he has 2 slides to present, and after 2 or 3 minutes from Alfred, I will give the floor also to Tony and to Daniela to address those same 2 questions. So, Alfred, you have the floor.
Okay, good morning. Well, thank you so much for this introduction, and also our thanks, of course, go to Bank Negara, World Bank and IFA for inviting us to this very important panel. And I believe it's also important to mention that we are very grateful that actually the issue of financial inclusion can be put into perspective with this very important issue of migration and remittances. So I'm basically going to speak a few minutes just about the connection between these 3, migration, remittances and financial inclusion, and then later perhaps we can also move towards the solutions. Now, this first slide, which you see there, just comes with a few data points, and the data that we have used here, I think we forgot to put the source on the slide, is from the National Migrants Report of the UN from 2017. So I think there are quite a few important numbers here. First of all, as we all know, the migration consists, of course, of the voluntary segment, which is the larger one, and also the group what we call the refugees. So you see that 1/10 of the international migrants here, of 258 million, are actually counted as refugees. It is also important that 47%, almost half, of these individuals are female. And more importantly, and I think this has also been highlighted in the opening remarks, around 800 million people out there in developing and emerging countries depend on these people who are on the move. Now, I think in the context of these numbers, it's also important to see that the average median age of the people we are talking about here is 39 years. So these are actually people who are in other places in the middle of their professional lives, so actually in a very productive phase of their lives. And it is also important to mention that Asia in 2017 has been the largest regional corridor globally for these people. So that's, I think, why we are also here. Also important to note is, of course, that we see a shift of population, with more people now living in developed nations and less people living in countries from the global south because of these movements. Now, just a quick snapshot now in view of these numbers. What do we see actually happening on the globe in the world of financial inclusion? And there, I think we have just seen from World Bank Findex the latest numbers. We see a reduction by a little bit more than 500 million people in the last 3 years in terms of access to foreign financial services. Unfortunately, the gender gap has not narrowed down further. We are still standing at 9%. And we have, on the other hand, a few encouraging signals, especially with regards to the elements or the factors that drive financial inclusion. So the main drivers, in fact, are digital payments, government policies, and the new generation of financial services access through mobile phones and the internet. And particularly sub-Saharan Africa, I think, demonstrated most persuasively that fintech can contribute to financial inclusion. Digital technology is also transforming the payment landscape. Globally, I think 52% of adults have sent or received digital payments in 2017, which is an increase because we only saw 42% in 2014. Having said that, of course, now the question is, what are the key pillars for inclusive financial services for migrant communities? And I would just like to mention 3 elements here. The first one is identification. I think this issue extends to receiving countries, as the majority of the people in low middle income countries do not have a legal identity. And this, in fact, is the main barrier for access to foreign financial services. So this statement refers exactly directly to the 800 million that I have actually shown on the first slide. And of course, this identification issue is also a big hurdle for most of the people who we see as refugees or forcibly displaced persons and even illegal immigrants. So the second pillar is indeed remittances. Remittance is very often the first financial service, some of these people get in touch with. And it is also one of the primary needs of migrant families in receiving countries, which in fact leads us now to the third pillar. And here I would like to mention that the third pillar, as we see it, is value-added activity and financial services. Because apart from remittances, these migrant families need other financial services such as savings, insurance, and credit. And the access and the usage of diverse financial services, especially among migrant countries on the receiving side, ensures sustainable economic development. Now, when we look at these numbers, and this is what we put here in the middle of this slide, the middle pillar here, the other two pillars I think have been mentioned, costs and also the connection with the SDGs. So let's just have a look at the middle one here. And this is very impressive because we can actually see that only 15% of the remittances are used for income generating activities and 10% is used for savings. So out of these 466 billion US dollars, there is a huge potential to keep money for financial inclusion, I would say. And I think we are here now to talk about the solutions, the recommendation that can make that happen. But I would like to stop here and just, opening up by setting the scenes of what at least we from the Alliance for Financial Inclusion side see as the challenge when it comes to, connecting migration, remittances, and financial inclusion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alfred, for setting the scene in a comprehensive manner. You not only demonstrate the importance of data, it was mentioned before. Yes, there's also data on the global level, but we need, of course, that data at the national level, even lower than that. And also, the issue of legal identity, as it happens, is also one of the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals, not only important for human rights and for refugee protection, but also for access to financial services. So thank you for pointing that out. So Daniela, can you, how does this issue of access to financial services, what are some of the stumbling blocks for people in Moldova or migrants from Moldova living in other countries? And perhaps can you tell us a little bit about innovative initiatives? I saw somewhere in the previous slide about the role of the post offices, and I think Moldova has also some experience with that. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. Before answering to the question, I would like first of all to say thank you to IFAD and to Negara Central Bank for inviting me. I very much resonated with the quote of Einstein saying that we can generate solution only going out of the box. That's why I'm out of the box from Moldova in Asia, in order to see and to learn from different experiences. And also I think indeed it's a good time having this discussion here also before the week when we are in the round, not the last round, but the last round of the negotiations of the Global Compact, when still substance can be put on the bone. And I think it's very important to have this type of discussion here. Indeed, for the Republic of Moldova, remittances, it's still a very relevant part. We are now around 20% of GDPs. That's why it plays a very important role in the policy making and also in general, in a way, migration picture. In order to talk about the challenges, I could group them in three. First, the main challenge was on data and on gathering data, and still migration is a very new phenomenon for Moldova, and it was very difficult in the beginning to have a knowledge where our Moldovans are, in which way they're remitting, what type of work they do, what type of profiles. And the main concentration in the beginning was to have tools in order to collect all this data. And we have the extended migration profile, which took a while in order to take the ownership on that, and we're producing it every year. and trying also to be better in terms of analyzing all this data, and I think still we can learn and to share this data with private sector also, where are the benefits of this. Also, we're doing the diaspora mapping, and here we have a separate chapter on remittances and also on their use of remittances, and also how we can also provide different changes in the policies in different services. And also the remittances are already a big part in all the banking reporting, and it's also important to and also in the part of the planning of the budget of the country, and to have an understanding and also estimate, be able to have the estimates for the future. Another part of the challenge is reducing the costs, and we worked hard in all the ways how we can reduce the cost of remittances, but also of migration. And we learned in the process that the less is the cost, then the higher can be the remittances and higher the savings. And the main concentrations is on this. And here comes the example that you just mentioned on the posts. We had an agreement with Italy, where our, it's one of the biggest destination for our Moldovans, in order to have the very low tax for 1,000 euros that are remitted. And it worked well in the rural areas, where still the banking were not that in a way covered, but it still didn't went at our expectation. We had a different in a way expectation on implementing this project. Even we're trying to multiply to other countries, we managed to sign contracts, agreements of this kind with Spain and Italy, on Portugal, but it's still not type of agreements that it's been very, very popular between our migrants. This is why we're trying to see and to develop different other services in order to motivate and also to reduce cost. And these different examples given by previous speakers in terms of digital opportunities and e-banking are becoming more and more popular. And it's very important also to work on literacy, financial literacy with all our communities. And one aspect is having family abroad and also in the country. That sometimes it's done via family in a way, but it's very important also when it's organized and it's more in a way structured. And another element I wanted to say is about opportunities. The one challenge, it was lack of opportunities, how remittances can be invested, how remittances can have more use of that. And we worked in the last years to have more programs, to motivate remittances to be invested in economy, like this program Pare 1+1, when government invests the same amount of resources as the migrants, the same in a way amount. And we have more than 200 projects per year financed, and it offers from 3,000 to 5,000 job opportunities. And also the women inclusion, to offer different opportunities for women, it's more and more promoted. Different other projects like diaspora bonds and investment trust funds, where the savings can play a bigger role in direct investment projects in the rural areas. We have just pilot projects into that. We're very interested to develop and to extend these types of initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniela. And again, the issue of data comes up, and I was thinking the other day, Alfred, and maybe you can comment on that. There is this data from the World Bank on financial inclusion. I think it's based on the survey, if I remember well, where that figure probably comes from, the 9 or 10% that you mentioned. Can that be broken down by migratory status? Can, in future surveys, can we collect the data to see whether people are migrants or non-migrants? After all, the SDGs call for disaggregation of data by migratory status, so that would be one way of capturing migrants more precisely in existing data collection efforts. Second, Daniela, thank you for bringing up the importance of collaboration. Migration is never an issue that can be solved or addressed by one country alone. We need these bilateral agreements between countries on issues such as remittances. Let me go to Tony before I ask the audience for 1 or 2 comments on this issue. Tony, do you want to, maybe from your own experience, say something about this issue of financial access and inclusion of migrants and their families, maybe some of the stumbling blocks or some of the new and innovative initiatives that you're witnessing? Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'm low cost, not used to this. Firstly, thank you to IFAD and Bank Negara for inviting me. I feel in a bit of an alien environment here. I'm dressed up today for Bank Negara. And listening to everyone here, I'm learning a lot as well. So thank you very much. Also want to thank Mr. Cole, who has sort of followed me around the world to ensure that I'm here today. So you delivered me. It's been an interesting 24 hours for me. I've been bashed around like a yo-yo. And so I'm thrilled to be in the sanctity of Bank Negara, protecting me right now. Our story is very simple, and when I listen to everyone on this panel, it does give me tremendous encouragement, actually. At AirAsia, we've only been focused on one thing, and one day Malaysians will realize the lengths we go to reduce cost. For us, when I started this business, only 2% of Malaysians, 6% of Malaysians flew. Now, probably everyone has the ability to fly. We have included the whole of the population to fly. This year we'll carry 90 million people. I started 16 years ago just carrying 200,000 people with 2 planes. And so inclusion is what AirAsia is all about. 60% of our destinations were destinations that no one ever went to before. So we included towns and cities that were never ever connected before. In my 16 years, and I run the company in a different way. I'm a cabin crew once in a while. I carry bags, and I check in people. I do it for 2 reasons. I don't think you'd be an effective CEO unless you go to the ground and know what your team are doing. I'll give you one little story, just for a digression. When we moved from the 737 to the Airbus, it was a few inches taller, so we used to throw the bags in. Actually, not throw the bags in, lovingly put the bags in. Kissing the bags, as you've seen from my social media. And my boys and girls said to me, we need to buy belt loaders. And I said, no, we can't afford that, it's too expensive. So the next time I carried bags, they put me on the Indonesian flights. Now, people who fly with us generally bring their house with them. People who fly to Indonesia bring their neighbor's house as well. So I almost broke my back in the process. And I went, I'm wrong, you're right. We go buy belt loaders today, and everyone was happy. Now, if I didn't do that, if I stayed in my office, I would have probably created a lot of bad backs and probably started a union. So, but through all this, whenever I fly, I meet all our passengers, I talk to everyone. And it's the best knowledge for me. It's the best data, meeting your customer base. And I found that a lot of our travelers, our guests, are migrant workers. And whether it's from all the places we fly, both ways. And migrant workers to me is not just manual labor, but people who are working in banks or airlines or whatever. And I've discovered that if I go back a little bit more, we were the first airline to create purchasing on the internet. That wasn't done before. That really left out a lot of people who didn't have a credit card. So we had to create many systems to include people into the internet. And Bank Negara was very supportive in terms of payment over the counter, in terms of booking, and then payment through ATMs, paying at 7-Eleven, etc. So inclusiveness has always been in our plan. We had to go to the internet, we had to go to this new technology to reduce the cost and enable a whole lot of people to fly and be more inclusive. And so that was our beginnings, and then through all these discussions we saw that actually people traveling around Southeast Asia and Asia, when they used credit cards, were actually losing a huge amount of money in exchange. And I also discovered that a whole lot of people who were migrant workers lost a lot of their hard-earned money and through remittance services. And so it's been my drive over the last few years to try and see whether we can do what we did in the airline business to the financial services. and try and reduce the cost and make people more inclusive. Because it's a large part of the disposable income, foreign exchange, is a large part of the disposable income also when you transfer, and if you see some of the fees that are being charged and the inefficiencies, it reminded me so much of the aviation business. So going back, where we have a big head start is we have a huge amount of data already. We've invested over the last 2 or 3 years a huge amount in building the pipes to create data. We work with Google, we're working with Palantir, and Amazon, etc., to build all this data and avatar our company. We've spent a good part of the 2 years. Then the next stage was to create something called Big Pay, which we have kind of soft launch at the moment, and already very quickly we have got 100,000 accounts. And Big Pay is an e-wallet, but that's just step one. Step two is to create a payment card that really slashes the cost of foreign exchange. We don't see why there's such a huge margin being made on travel, or when you travel and pay. And then our next stage, provided the regulators approve it, and we have lots of work to do, and my 2 members of my team are over there who are supposed to do it, or they get fired. Mr. Coe says they're not quick enough. So it's, Negara is fantastic. It's the first time a regulator chases us. They're so far ahead of everyone else. And would be remittance.